Good morning, students. So today we are going to take up the very first poem in your syllabus. The name of the poem is The Heart of the Tree, written by famous American poet and novelist Henry Cuyler Bunner. Now this poem is something which was published originally in the year 1912, which means more than 100 years ago. Now the poem has intentionally been chosen for your syllabus because the subject matter of this poem is really very significant. It is about, as the title of the poem suggests, about why we must conserve nature and why we must plant more trees. So you see, the consensus for the necessity of planting more trees had in fact been very much there in the year 1912. So for the last 100 years or so, it's not just the environmentalists but also the poets and authors and all those who are concerned about the safety and security of mankind and those who really care for the earth. We have them telling us about planting more trees. So The Heart of the Tree is a poem with a very simple theme and a very simple structure. Now before we begin with the poem, let me also tell you that on your screen you can see the black and white photograph of the poet Henry Cuyler Bunner, and we can see his name written below, and just below that you have the title of the poem, The Heart of the Tree. Now if we talk in terms of botany, which is a part of biology which you all study, it is obvious that a tree does not have a heart. But at the same time, when we are dealing with literature, we have to think from the point of view of what a tree could possibly be as a living creature, which we do not realize many a times. Planting a tree is always a great work for mankind. But the poet has found new ways to look at the plants and plantation. In this poem, The Heart of the Tree, he glorifies the act further, shows how a tree helps life on earth, and says that it has a direct connection to a nation's growth. Now you can see on your screen Henry Cuyler Bunner. He was born in the year 1855 and died in 1896. However, this poem was published in 1912. So you can see that this poem was published posthumously, that is after the death of the poet. And the subject matter or the content of the poem still holds good in the present day scenario. Now there are 3 stanzas in this poem. We will soon be reading those stanzas and I'll be explaining the lines to you. It starts, the poem starts with a refrain. The poet is asking what man actually plants when he plants a tree. Then he gives the reply by himself and shows what a tree means to humankind or mankind and to nature, thus proving how great the tree can be for man. So before I go into the line by line explanation of the poem, let us once give a quick reading to the poem. It will give you some idea, an overall idea will be formed about the poem when you read it. So let's read. What does he plant who plants a tree? He plants a friend of sun and sky. He plants the flag of breezes free, the shaft of beauty towering high. He plants a home to heaven and I, for song and mother croon of bird, in hushed and happy twilight heard, the treble of heaven's harmony. These things he plants who plants a tree. So you see, the first line of the stanza is the question, and then the rest of the lines are the answers to that question. Now, second stanza. What does he plant who plants a tree? He plants a cool shade and tender rain, and seed and bud of days to be, and years that fade and flush again. He plants the glory of the plain. He plants the forest's heritage, the harvests, or rather the harvest of a coming age, the joy that unborn eyes shall see. These things he plants who plants a tree. So again, in the second stanza, the first line is a question, and it is the same question. But the question can be one, but the answers are many. And so, throughout the second stanza also, we find the poet giving answers to that question. Now we come to the third stanza, which is the last stanza of the poem. What does he plant who plants a tree? He plants in sap and leaf and wood, in love of home and loyalty, and far cast thought of civic good. His blessings on the neighborhood, who in the hollow of his hand holds all the growth of all our land. A nation's growth from sea to sea stirs in his heart who plants a tree. So that's the text of the poem. Now let us try to understand line by line what this poem is trying to tell us. And also let us try to understand the theme of the poem, the basic theme, as well as the rhyme scheme of this poem and the figures of speech, if any. So let us begin once again from the very first stanza, which begins with a refrain. What is a refrain? Refrain is a line which is repeated again and again in poetry. So here the first line is a refrain because it is the same line which is again found in the second stanza and also the third stanza. Alright, now let's try to understand the lines of the poem. Let us begin with the first stanza. What does he plant who plants a tree? So as I told you, it is the refrain which is repeated in all the three stanzas. So the poet says he plants a friend of sun and sky. That means when a human being plants a tree, he is actually planting a friend of both the sun and the sky. You see, the poem opens with the refrain and sets the tone of the entire poem. We almost immediately understand that the poet is going to explain the usefulness of planting a tree. So he says that by planting a tree, man plants a friend of sun and sky. And then what happens? He plants the flag of breezes free. So what happens? The tree is planted like a sapling, which is a small plant, but then it starts growing. And it grows upwards and aims to reach the sun and the sky. So it is as if the sun and the sky get a new friend in a tree. Secondly, the tree needs sunlight and air to survive. And finally, the tree seems to absorb the heat and save the earth from the scorching sun. So this gives an implication that the sun becomes friendly in the presence of the tree. So what happens to the tree when it grows up from a sapling to a full grown tree? It becomes it becomes so big, its leaves become so numerous that when the breeze blows through them, when the wind blows, these leaves, they flutter in the wind, and so they are being compared to the flag of breezes free. So the blowing breeze makes the leaves in the branches of the tree to wave like flags. So this is the implication, that it is like a flag which flies freely in the mild breeze. So the poet here compares the leafy branches of the tree to a flag. And then he goes on to say something about the body of the tree. First the leaf, now we come to the body or the trunk of the tree. The shaft of beauty towering high. You see? The stem or the shaft or the pole, it's long, round, cylindrical as it goes up. You have all seen trees, they look long and roundish. So that is why they are comparable to a shaft. So the beautiful flagpole, if the leaves are the flags, or if the leaves collectively in the branches are the flags, then the stem or the body, main trunk of the tree is like the flagpole. So it stands tall. It reaches high up into the sky, much higher than buildings, much higher than us. So that is why it is called a shaft of beauty towering high. It looks very beautiful with all its green leaves and the branches, and then the breeze blowing through them, and the leaves murmuring, making a murmuring sound. So it all looks so beautiful. Then the poet says, he plants a home to heaven and I for song and mother croon of bird. So what does it mean? That by planting a tree, man actually plants a home for the sweet singing birds that fly high up in the sky near heaven. So you see, this home is nearer to heaven. We down here on earth are far from heaven. But the birds which build their nest or nests in the branches of these trees that grow very high, very tall, they are closer to heaven because they are high up from us, much higher than us. That's the reason why the poet says that by planting a sapling which later grows up into a tree, you not only help the environment, but you also help nature. In what way? By providing a dwelling place for the birds. The birds that fly in the sky, they come and build their nests in the branches of those trees, and their homes, the homes of the birds are the nests, are closer to heaven. So he keeps the earth habitable for birds. Man keeps the earth habitable for birds and helps in maintaining the ecosystem. So as I told you in the beginning, that this is a poem which was written more than 100 years ago, but the concern for nature and environment is very much applicable to the present day scenario of the world. So then the poet goes on to say, well, the mother croon of birds, this concept needs to be understood. It's explained in your workbook. You should also refer to the workbook from time to time to see the explanations which are provided in a separate portion in the workbook called notes. Always keep that open beside you when you are understanding a poem or reading the text of a poem. Just as I tell you in The Merchant of Venice, you have to see the explanations given side by side. So also while reading poetry, keep your workbook open and look at the notes which are provided, where the words and phrases, terms and terminologies, references, all these things are explained for you. So you can talk about mother croon of bird, meaning to say that when a nest is built in the branches of the tree, when does a bird build a nest? To lay its eggs. and to take care of its young ones when they hatch. So the mother bird sits with her eggs till they hatch into tiny little chicks. And these little birds, they do not know how to fly. And the mother bird collects food for them and brings them the food and feeds them. And sometimes it's both the father bird and the mother bird. So it's a nest. It's a nest. It's a home. It's a place where little birds are born. They are hatched from their eggs and then they grow up. So in a way you are helping nature by planting trees, because you are helping the birds to breed. And it's also therefore the home for birds which sing beautifully. So if you have trees around you, you will be able to hear the beautiful song of the different birds. So that is why for song and mother croon of bird. In hushed and happy twilight heard the treble of heaven's harmony. These things he plants, who plants a tree. So in quiet and happy twilight. What is twilight? The time of the day which is right after sunset and just before it is completely dark. The sun goes down in the western sky, in the western horizon, and one or two stars have started appearing in the eastern sky in the meantime, and the light of the day has not yet disappeared fully. In other words, it is dusk. And it is that particular hour of the day when the birds return to their respective trees where they perch for the night. And even the mother bird returns to her nest. So that is the time when you get to hear the songs of the different birds as they come home. The tree becomes the home of so many different birds. So in hushed or quiet and happy twilight or dusk, you can hear such beautiful songs of different birds. And it seems to be the treble of heaven's harmony. So here metaphorically the poet tries to compare and says that the music produced by the song of the birds is just like heavenly music. As if in heaven there is music being played which down below on earth we human beings can hear. So the tree is so useful. That is why he ends with the line, these things he plants who plants a tree. So when you are planting a sapling, you are planting so many things. You are planting a friend of the sun and sky. You are planting a flag of breezes. So you are helping the sky, you are helping the sun, you are helping the wind. You are helping environment because trees beautify nature, so it's a shaft of beauty which stands very tall. You are helping nature by providing a habitat, a dwelling place for birds who can build their nests in the branches of the tree and who can lay their eggs, and then further birds are born out of them. So you see, you are helping in every way possible. So these are the things you are planting. When you are planting a sapling, you are actually planting all these things that are related to that sapling, which will grow into a tree. I hope you understand what I mean to say. I think up to this much is clear to all. If so, then let's proceed with the second stanza. Now in the second stanza, again the poet has the same question to ask. I told you it's the refrain. What does he plant who plants a tree? And then again he goes on to give the reply. He plants cool shade and tender rain. So in the second stanza, you see, the poet says that when a person plants a tree, he plants something which provides us with cool shade and helps in bringing rain. So when you are planting a tree, you are actually bringing rainfall. You see, because trees cool down the environment. Where there are no trees, those places become deserts. But where you have more of trees, you will have more of coolness in the air and you will have more of rainfall. See, trees and nature, they fulfill each other. If you have more trees, you will have cooler atmosphere, cooler weather conditions, and then you will have lots of rainfall. And because of rainfall, there will be more trees growing, so the vegetation will grow faster. So one complements the other. This is very important. So when you are planting a tree, you are planting actually cool shade, and you are also facilitating or helping gentle rainfall to occur. And seed and bud of days to be, and years that fade and flush again, he plants the glory of the plain. So by planting a tree, you are also helping or facilitating the process of seed production and bud production for the future. If you have trees, from trees you will have more trees, because trees will produce fruits, and these fruits will produce seeds, and from those seeds which will fall on the ground, once again new saplings will grow. And in this way, in a cyclical process, you will have a better future for mankind and for the earth, because there will be more and more trees. So instead of cutting down trees, that is why this poem is the first poem in your syllabus. It's an eye opener for all, that if you read this poem, you realize how important trees are and why we should plant them. Because by planting just one tree, you can help nature immensely. We must all try to do that, because trees produce seeds and buds that bloom into flowers, and from flowers you get the fruit, and from fruit you get the seed, and once again you get a sapling when the seed falls to the ground, and then again it grows into another tree. And in this process, you can say this is the cyclical process of regeneration that takes place in nature. And years that fade and flush again. So what happens with the changing seasons? The year fades away. When autumn comes, the leaves start to fall. By winter, all the leaves are gone. Remember, we are reading a poem written by an American poet. In America, that is how it happens. We live in a tropical country. Here we get to see lot of trees which are always green, and then we get to see trees with bigger leaves. Some are deciduous, of course. But if you go to America, you will find that by autumn, they call it the season of fall, the leaves start turning yellow and orange and red, and then they fall off. Till finally the trees become completely bare, because it's time for winter, and then it starts snowing, and then everything is covered with snow. So that's how the year is said to fade out. The year fades out and goes under the cover of snow. But as soon as spring arrives, the snow starts melting. The trees don't die. They are just dormant. And once again they start sprouting their new green leaves. And then you have the blooming of flowers. And then you have a regeneration of nature, till finally it is summer, and in summer it is the time for fruiting. So the trees start producing fruits. So in this way, once again, the nature tries to renew itself. So that is why this concept of years that fade and flush again. Flush means the sprouting of new leaves is known as flush. So he plants the glory of the plain, he plants the forest's heritage. So by planting a tree, you are actually planting something which glorifies, which makes the plain, the vast expanse of the plain. If there are no trees, it will soon turn into a desert. But if there are trees, then obviously the grass will grow down below, because the tree will provide shade. The tree will help bring rainfall. So it's the glory of the plain. He plants the forest's heritage, and the tree is also the heritage of the forest. So today's single tree may turn into a forest someday. So if you are planting a tree now, you are planting something which will turn into a forest in future. So that's the concept of forest's heritage. A forest is not possible unless you have hundreds of trees or thousands of trees. So with one tree, it all begins with just a single tree. And then from one tree to another, as I told you, because of the seeding process, new saplings will keep growing continuously year after year till it will become dense. It will become full of trees, and then we will call it a forest. So by planting a single sapling, the poet says that you are actually planting the possibility of the formation of a forest. Remember this. Forest's heritage here means the possibility of the formation of a forest in future. If you are able to plant a sapling now and take care of it, it will grow. Don't cut it down. Let it live, and it will produce seeds. And from those seeds, there will be newer saplings till finally you will have a forest. But unfortunately, man only believes in deforestation, whereas we should be doing afforestation. So this is the biggest problem with the modern century. We are indiscriminately cutting down trees, and we are destroying the forest cover, because of which we are having global warming, melting of polar ice caps, and terrible cyclones, and so many other anomalies of the weather conditions on earth, all because of our own fault. It's all because of man's doings that we are facing such catastrophe one after another. So had we followed what the poet is telling us here, what he told us here 100 years ago, if we had followed for the past 100 years, then today the world would have been a much better place to live in. Global warming would not have actually occurred if we had not cut down our forests. So the poet is advocating, professing, telling us, please do a favor, plant a tree. So then the poet goes on to say, the harvest of a coming age, the joy that unborn eyes shall see. So when you plant a tree, you are helping in the harvest of a coming age. What does it mean? It means that if you plant a tree today, the tree will give fruits in the years to come. Sometimes certain trees will give you fruits in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but they will give fruits. So the future generation of mankind will benefit from it. The coming age, which is the future, will benefit from it, will be able to harvest that fruit, will be able to enjoy the fruit produced by the tree which you plant today. The next generation will enjoy it, and then it will be a joy that unborn eyes shall see. Unborn eyes, those who are not even born today. If the forefathers have planted trees, their children and grandchildren are able to enjoy the fruits produced by those trees. But the trees were planted by the forefathers before the next generation came into being, before the children were born. So that is what is meant here. Our next generation would be delighted to see so much vegetation and reap its benefits. So all the credit goes to the man who plants a tree. That is what you plant when you plant a tree. So with that we come to the end of the second stanza. Now we move on to the last stanza. Again that same refrain, What does he plant who plants a tree? He plants in sap and leaf and wood, in love of home and loyalty. So, what does a person plant when he plants a tree? Well, by planting a tree, the man shows his love and loyalty. Love and loyalty for this earth. Here, home is mentioned in love of home and loyalty, meaning to say that he shows his love and loyalty for the earth. And in planting a tree, he not only plants a tree, he also plants the sap, the leaf, the wood. Everything that makes up a tree is planted by him when he plants a small sapling. Because the tree is made up of sap, leaf, and wood. And what does he plant? He plants his love. He displays his love and he displays his loyalty for his home. And Farquhar's thought of civic good, his sense of civic duty, his blessings on the neighborhood. So, by planting a tree, you are actually fulfilling your responsibility as a human being. As a person who lives on earth, you are fulfilling your responsibility. So, you are doing your civic duty and you are providing your blessings on your fellow human beings, on your neighborhood. So, as the Holy Scriptures say, love thy neighbor. You should love your neighbor. Don't be selfish. If you plant a tree, you prove that you are not selfish, that you love your neighbors. And what can be a greater happiness than when you share the fruits of that tree with your neighbors, with your family, with your friends, with your neighbors. When you share, they say sharing increases happiness, helps happiness to become greater happiness. All these are reflected in the sap and leaf and wood in every cell of the tree. So, then the poet goes on to say, who in the hollow of his hand holds all the growth of our land, a nation's growth from sea to sea stirs in his heart who plants a tree. His blessings on the neighborhood. Actually, what happens is, by planting a tree, you help to bring down God's blessings on your neighborhood. See, his here refers to God Almighty. When you are planting a tree, it seems that you have brought down the hand of God's blessings upon your entire neighborhood. Neighborhood means your fellow human beings. And who is he? He is the one who in the hollow of his hands, look, his is written with capital H. Though it is a pronoun, it's written with capital H only when we refer to God. When the pronoun is used for God, only then it is written with capital H. So, who holds the entire creation in the hollow of his hands? Obviously God, Almighty God. So, who in the hollow of his hand holds all the growth of our land? So, God is the one who holds the entire growth of our land, a nation's growth from sea to sea, from one corner of the world to another, and it stirs or moves in the heart of a person who actually plants a tree. The last line is very important as it talks about the man's heart. It talks about his feelings, dreams, and wishes behind planting the tree. And this also leads to the poem's title, The Heart of the Tree. So, that man who plants a tree has a very big heart. His heart is comparable to the heart of God, the creator of everything on earth. So, by Planting a tree, you are actually behaving like God. You are actually acting like God, because God has created nature and you are assisting in that task of God by planting a tree. So that's what the poem is all about. I hope you have understood the text. So let us also now do the question answers of this poem. I expect all of you to complete all the question answers of this poem in your English literature homework copies, and keep your work ready. When the school reopens, I'll be asking for the homework. So thank you.